Disclaimer. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I am not giving medical advice. Do not use this information to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always talk to a qualified healthcare provider before starting, stopping, or changing any supplement, peptide, medication, or wellness routine. If you are pregnant, breastfeeding, have a medical condition, or take prescription medications, you need professional guidance before using anything discussed today. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about one of the most popular, most hyped, and honestly one of the most fascinating molecules in modern health and longevity conversations, NAD+. You have probably heard it called the energy molecule, the anti-aging molecule, the cellular battery charger, the thing that makes you feel younger, the thing that people swear gives them insane mental clarity, the thing that celebrities get in 4 clinics for thousands of dollars. And I get it. Because NAD+ is not just another supplement trend. NAD is something your body literally cannot live without. So today I am going to break NAD+ down in a simple, easy way. We're going to talk about what it is, what it does, why it matters, why it declines with age, what people use it for, what the research suggests, what forms exist, how it is typically used, what side effects to watch for, and what you should know before you spend money on it. And by the end of this episode, you're going to understand NAD+, so well that you can explain it to your friends in plain English. Let's start with the basics. What is NAD+? NAD stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And the plus means it is in its oxidized form. Now I know that sounds like a chemistry class, but stay with me. Think of NAD+ like a worker inside your cells. It is one of the main molecules that helps your body convert food into energy. Not just energy like caffeine energy, real energy, cellular energy, the energy your mitochondria use to keep you alive. NAD+ is involved in a process called cellular respiration. That is basically the process where your cells take nutrients from food like glucose and fats and convert them into ADP. ADP is the actual energy currency of your body. ADP is what powers muscle contractions, brain activity, nerve signaling, metabolism, and basically everything. And NAD+ is one of the key players that makes ADP production possible. So when people say NAD+ is involved in energy, they are not exaggerating. It is literally required for your cells to create usable energy. But that is only part of the story. NAD+ is also involved in cellular repair. And that is where things get really interesting. Because NAD is not just a fuel molecule. It is also a repair molecule. It helps regulate enzymes in your body that fix DNA damage, reduce oxidative stress, and manage inflammation. And if you're listening to a peptide podcast, you already know that inflammation and oxidative stress are huge drivers of aging and disease. So NAD+ is like this multi-tool inside your body. It helps create energy, and it helps maintain and repair your cells. Now here is the million-dollar question. If NAD+ is so important, why is everyone talking about boosting it? Because NAD+ declines with age. And this is one of the most consistent findings in longevity research. As you get older, your NAD levels drop. Some research suggests NAD levels can decrease significantly by middle age and even more by the time you are elderly. So you have this situation where the very molecule you need to make energy and repair your body becomes less available as you age, which means your body is operating with less fuel and less repair power. And that is one reason aging feels like aging. You feel more tired. You recover slower. Your metabolism changes. Your brain might feel foggier. Your skin changes. Your muscles weaken easier. Your endurance drops. And your cells accumulate more damage. So scientists started asking the question, what if we could restore NAD levels? Could we improve energy? Could we slow aspects of aging? Could we improve mitochondrial function? Could we help brain function? Could we improve metabolic health? Could we support immune function? Could we support recovery? And that is why NAD became such a major focus. Now, let's talk about what NAD actually does in the body in a little more detail, but still simple. NAD+ is involved in something called redox reactions. Redox basically means oxidation and reduction. That is how your body transfers electrons. And that is how energy gets produced in your cells. NAD+ can accept electrons and become NADH. Then NADH can donate those electrons and go back to NAD+. So it cycles back and forth. This is a constant process. So if you are low on NAD+, your body has less ability to perform those energy-producing reactions. That can affect mitochondria. It can affect endurance. It can affect muscle performance. It can affect mental clarity. It can affect basically everything. Now here is another key point. NAD is used by enzymes called sirtuins. You have probably heard about sirtuins. Sirtuins are sometimes called longevity genes. Now that is not technically accurate, but it is a popular way to describe them. Sirtuins help regulate inflammation, metabolism, stress resistance, and cellular survival pathways. They are heavily involved in the idea of healthy aging. And sirtuins require NAD+ to function. So if NAD is low, sirtuins cannot do their job properly. NAD is also used by PRP enzymes. PRP enzymes help repair DNA damage. And DNA damage happens all the time. It happens from sunlight, pollution, oxidative stress, inflammation, normal metabolism, and even just existing. Your body is constantly repairing your DNA. But if NAD is low, those repair enzymes may not work as efficiently. So again, NAD is tied to energy and repair. And that is why it is so central to aging. Now, let's talk about why NAD levels decline. Because it is not just because you get older. It is also because your body is under more stress. Chronic inflammation can burn through NAD. Oxidative stress can burn through NAD. Poor sleep can affect NAD. Poor diet can affect NAD. Alcohol can deplete NAD. Certain infections can affect NAD metabolism. High levels of stress can affect NAD. Even excessive sun exposure can impact NAD usage because your body has to repair more damage. So the modern lifestyle is basically a perfect storm for draining NAD. And then aging adds another layer on top. So NAD levels can drop and your body can start operating less efficiently. Now, let's talk about what people actually use NAD+ for. Because if you go online, people will claim it does everything. So, let's break down the main reasons people are interested in NAD. Number 1, energy and fatigue. A lot of people use NAD support because they feel tired all the time. They feel like their battery is dead. They feel like caffeine is not working anymore. They feel like they wake up exhausted. Now, NAD is not a stimulant. It is not like taking Adderall. It is not like caffeine. It is not like a pre-workout. It is more like restoring the underlying cellular machinery that produces energy. So people often describe it as feeling more stable energy, less crash, more motivation, better physical endurance, better recovery. Number 2, brain fog and cognitive clarity. This is a big one. Many people report NAD makes their brain feel sharper. Now, why would that happen? Because your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in your body. It uses a massive amount of ADP. If your mitochondria are not producing energy efficiently, your brain can feel sluggish. So by supporting NAD, some people feel like their brain just works better. They feel more alert, more clear, more focused, less depressed, less anxious. Now, to be clear, NAD is not an antidepressant, but it can influence cellular energy and inflammation, and those things can affect mood. Number 3, longevity and anti-aging. This is the main marketing angle. And it is not totally wrong. Because NAD is involved in pathways that regulate aging. But we need to be realistic. NAD is not a magic fountain of youth. It is not going to stop aging. It is not going to reverse time. But supporting NAD may help your cells function more like younger cells, especially in the areas of mitochondrial function and DNA repair. So people use NAD because they want healthier aging, better skin, better sleep, better metabolism, better recovery, better resilience. Number 4, metabolic health and weight management. NAD is involved in insulin sensitivity and fat metabolism. It is involved in how your body processes glucose. And it is tied to mitochondrial function, which affects metabolic rate. So NAD is often stacked with weight loss peptides or metabolic peptides because it supports the cellular energy side of the equation. If you are using something like a GLP-1 and you are losing weight, your body still needs to maintain energy production and recovery. NAD can be supportive there. Number 5. Addiction and recovery support. This is a more niche area, but it is real. Some clinics use NAD IV protocols for addiction recovery, especially for alcohol, opioids, and other substances. Now, is NAD a cure for addiction?
No.
But NAD may support neurotransmitter balance and cellular recovery in the brain. Some people report improved cravings, improved mood, and improved mental stability. The evidence is still developing, but it is a known area of NAD use. Number 6. Athletic performance and recovery. Athletes are very interested in NAD because if your mitochondria can produce more ADP, you can potentially perform better. But also, if your cells can repair faster, you can recover faster. So NAD is popular in the biohacking and fitness world for endurance and recovery. Number 7. Immune function and inflammation. NAD is involved in immune cell function, and it is involved in inflammatory regulation. If your NAD levels are low, your immune system may not function as efficiently. Also, chronic inflammation can drain NAD. So boosting NAD is sometimes viewed as a way to support immune resilience, especially for people dealing with chronic illness or inflammatory conditions. Now, let's talk about the difference between NAD+ and NADH, because people get confused. NAD+ is the oxidized form. NADH is the reduced form. NAD+ accepts electrons. NADH donates electrons. They both matter. But NAD+ is the form most associated with activating sirtuins and DNA repair enzymes. So when people talk about NAD for longevity, they are usually talking about NAD+ availability. Now, let's talk about the next big topic. How do people increase NAD? Because you cannot just eat NAD and expect it to magically get into your cells easily. NAD is a molecule your body makes. So most strategies are about supporting NAD production or slowing NAD breakdown. There are a few ways to do this. One way is lifestyle. Exercise increases NAD, especially endurance exercise. Caloric restriction and fasting can increase NAD. Heat exposure, like sauna use, may influence NAD-related pathways. Cold exposure may influence metabolic pathways. Good sleep supports NAD balance. Reducing alcohol supports NAD. Reducing chronic inflammation supports NAD. So yes, lifestyle matters. But most people want to know about supplements and injections. So let's talk about NAD precursors. NAD precursors are molecules your body can convert into NAD. The most popular ones are NR and NMN. NR is nicotinamide riboside. NMN is nicotinamide mononucleotide. Both of these can be converted into NAD. Another precursor is niacin, also known as vitamin B3. Niacin can be converted into NAD, but it can cause flushing. Another precursor is nicotinamide, also called niacinamide. That can also contribute to NAD production, but there is debate about whether high doses can inhibit certain sirtuin activity. So the supplement world mostly focuses on NR and NMN. NMN became extremely popular because it is one step closer to NAD than NR. But the reality is, both can raise NAD levels. Now, a lot of people will argue about which is better. NR versus NMN. In my opinion, for the average person, they both can be useful. But the quality of the product matters a lot. And the dose matters a lot. Now, let's talk about NAD injections and NAD IV. Because this is where the peptide and biohacking world gets excited. NAD can be administered intravenously. That is NAD IV therapy. It can also be injected intramuscularly or subcutaneously in certain protocols. And it can also be used as a nasal spray in some products. Now, NAD IV is known for being intense. People often describe NAD IV as giving them a weird chest pressure, nausea, anxiety, flushing, or a sensation like their body is being forced to speed up. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people say it is life-changing. Some people say it was the worst infusion of their life. That is because NAD is directly influencing cellular metabolism. And when you flood the system quickly, the body can react strongly. Many clinics administer NAD IV slowly over hours, sometimes 2 to 4 hours. Because if you run it too fast, it can be very uncomfortable. NAD injections, like intramuscular NAD, can also burn. It can cause soreness. It can cause inflammation at the injection site. So NAD is not always a smooth, easy experience. But many people still use it because of the benefits. Now let's talk about why NAD therapy can feel intense. One reason is that NAD impacts cellular energy production. Another reason is that NAD is involved in neurotransmitter pathways. It affects dopamine metabolism indirectly. It affects the nervous system. It also can cause changes in blood vessel tone and circulation. So it is not surprising that some people feel flushing, tightness, nausea, or even anxiety. It is not necessarily dangerous, but it is uncomfortable for some. That is why dosing and delivery speed matters. Now, let's talk about what NAD+ may help with, specifically in a more structured way. Let's start with mitochondria. Mitochondria are the power plants of your cells. They take nutrients and oxygen and produce ADP. As you age, mitochondrial function often declines. This is linked to fatigue, brain fog, metabolic slowdown, and muscle weakness. NAD supports mitochondrial function because it is essential for the electron transport chain. So boosting NAD can potentially improve mitochondrial efficiency. And that is why NAD is linked to energy. Now, another major area is DNA repair. Your DNA is constantly being damaged. Your body has enzymes that fix it, but those enzymes require NAD. So if NAD is low, repair is slower. That can contribute to aging. Now, inflammation. Inflammation is a double-edged sword. You need it to heal. But chronic inflammation is destructive. It damages tissue, accelerates aging, and drives disease. NAD supports pathways that regulate inflammation. So NAD may help reduce inflammatory signaling indirectly. This is why some people feel better joint comfort or less overall inflammation when they restore NAD levels. Now, metabolism. NAD is involved in insulin sensitivity. It is involved in fat oxidation. It is involved in glucose metabolism. So NAD may support metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility means your body can switch between burning glucose and burning fat efficiently. If your metabolism is damaged, you might feel sluggish, gain weight easily, and have cravings. Supporting NAD may improve how your body handles energy. Now, brain health. Your brain is mitochondria heavy. It needs energy constantly. It also accumulates oxidative stress over time. NAD is involved in neuronal survival pathways. So NAD is being researched heavily in neurodegenerative conditions. Now, I am not saying NAD cures Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, but NAD is a major focus in brain longevity research. Because if we can support energy production and reduce neuronal stress, we may support brain aging. Now, let's talk about NAD and aging in a way that makes sense. Aging is not just wrinkles. Aging is the gradual accumulation of cellular damage. It is mitochondrial decline. It is inflammation. It is reduced repair. It is hormonal shifts. It is immune dysfunction. It is metabolic decline. And NAD is connected to almost all of those. That is why NAD is so central. Now, let's talk about why NAD is often stacked with other compounds. Because NAD is not usually used alone. In the peptide world, NAD is often combined with things like BPC 157 for healing, GHKCU for skin and repair, thymosin alpha 1 for immune support, MOS-C for mitochondrial function, Cmax and C-link for brain and stress support, GLP-1 peptides for weight loss, sermorelin or growth hormone secretagogues for recovery and body composition. And the reason NAD pairs well with those is because NAD is foundational. It supports cellular energy. So if you are using other compounds to signal healing, metabolism, or growth, NAD helps provide the energy and repair capacity to follow through. Now let's talk about the NAD pathway and why NAD can sometimes feel like it stops working. This is something people experience. They start NAD support and feel amazing for 2 weeks. Then they feel nothing. And they think it stopped working. Sometimes it is not that it stopped working. Sometimes it is that your body adjusted and you reached a new baseline. Your energy may be improved, but now that is your normal. So you do not feel that dramatic contrast anymore. Another issue is that NAD can increase demand for certain nutrients. For example, NAD metabolism can interact with methylation pathways. So some people find that when they take NMN or NR, they also need to support methylation with nutrients like folate, B12, betaine, or TMG. TMG is trimethylglycine. That is a popular stack. People will take NMN plus TMG. The reason is because NAD boosting can increase nicotinamide metabolism, and methyl groups may be used up in the process. Now, I am not telling you to take that. I am just explaining why people stack them. Another reason NAD can feel less effective is if your lifestyle is still draining it. If you are drinking alcohol regularly, sleeping poorly, chronically stressed, inflamed, and sedentary, you can raise NAD but still feel tired. Because the drain is too strong. So, NAD is not a substitute for sleep. It is not a substitute for exercise. It is not a substitute for a decent diet. It is more like a cellular upgrade. But you still need to support the system. Now, let's talk about NAD and sleep. This is fascinating. Your circadian rhythm is connected to NAD metabolism. Your sleep-wake cycle is tied to energy and repair cycles. Some research suggests NAD and sirtuins play roles in circadian regulation. So if your NAD is low, your sleep quality might suffer. And if your sleep is poor, your NAD regulation can suffer. So it is a loop. Some people report NAD helps them sleep better. Others report it makes them wired if they take it too late. So timing matters. If you are using NAD support, a lot of people prefer taking it in the morning. Because it supports daytime energy, and because it may disrupt sleep if taken late. Now, let's talk about NAD and workouts. Many people love NAD for workouts because they feel more endurance. They feel like they can push longer. They recover faster. But one thing to know is that NAD can sometimes make you feel like your body is warming up internally. Some people get a flushed sensation. Some people get mild nausea. So if you are new to NAD, it might be smart not to take your highest dose right before a workout until you know how you respond. Now let's talk about NAD and skin. This is a big part of the anti-aging hype. NAD is connected to skin aging because skin cells are constantly dividing, constantly exposed to UV light, and constantly being damaged. Skin requires good mitochondrial function and good DNA repair. So supporting NAD could support skin resilience. But NAD alone is not going to give you instant glowing skin. It is more of a long-term cellular support tool. People who combine NAD with collagen support, hydration, red light therapy, GHKCU, microneedling, and good skincare often see the best skin changes. Because NAD is part of a bigger picture. Now, let's talk about NAD and weight loss. Some people assume NAD is a fat burner. It is not a stimulant fat burner. It is not like clenbuterol. It is not like ephedrine. It is not like euhimbine. It is more about metabolic efficiency. If your mitochondria work better, you may burn fuel more effectively. That can support body composition. Also, NAD can support energy and motivation, which can make you more active. So indirectly, NAD may support weight loss. But it is not a replacement for diet and movement. Now let's talk about NAD and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when your cells stop responding well to insulin. That means glucose stays in the blood, and your body stores more fat, you get more inflammation, and your metabolism slows. NAD is involved in pathways that regulate insulin sensitivity. So boosting NAD may support metabolic health. This is why NAD precursors are being researched for type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Now let's talk about NAD and aging hormones. People ask if NAD boosts testosterone, or boosts estrogen, or boosts growth hormone. NAD is not a hormone, but hormones depend on cellular energy. Your endocrine system depends on mitochondria. So supporting NAD may help your body produce hormones more efficiently. But it is not a direct hormone replacement. So if someone has low testosterone, NAD is not a replacement for medical care. But NAD could support overall endocrine resilience. Now let's talk about NAD and the immune system. Immune cells need energy. Immune cells also create oxidative stress as part of fighting infections. That means immune cells use NAD heavily. So NAD can support immune function. But there is a nuance here. If someone has an autoimmune condition, immune support is not always straightforward, because the immune system is already overactive in certain ways. So for autoimmune individuals, NAD might still be beneficial, but it should be approached thoughtfully and ideally with professional guidance. Now let's talk about NAD and chronic illness. People with chronic fatigue syndromes, fibromyalgia, long COVID, or chronic inflammatory conditions often look at NAD because of the fatigue component. And I understand why. Because NAD is tied to mitochondrial function. Now, I want to be careful here. NAD is not a guaranteed fix. But mitochondrial support is one of the major strategies being explored in these conditions. So NAD is part of that conversation. Now, let's talk about the different types of NAD products. Because there are a lot. You have NAD IV therapy. You have NAD injections. You have NAD nasal sprays. You have oral NAD supplements. You have NAD precursors like NMN and NR. And you have combination products. Here is what you need to know. Oral NAD itself has questionable absorption. NAD is a larger molecule and may break down before it gets into cells effectively. That is why NAD precursors like NMN and NR became so popular. Because your body can absorb them and convert them. NAD IV bypasses digestion and delivers NAD directly. That is why it is intense and fast. NAD injections also bypass digestion, but the delivery is slower than IV, depending on how it is administered. Nasal NAD is designed to potentially support brain delivery more directly, but the research is still developing. So the method you choose depends on your goals, your budget, and your tolerance. Now, let's talk about dosing. Because this is what everyone wants to know. What is the typical NAD plus dose? And I'm going to answer this carefully. In clinics, NAD IV protocols can range anywhere from 250 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams per infusion, sometimes higher. But it is usually administered slowly, and it is personalized. For NAD injections, protocols vary widely. Some people use small daily doses. Some people use larger doses a few times per week. Some people do loading phases. Some people do maintenance phases. For oral precursors like NMN and NR, typical doses in the supplement world range from 250 milligrams per day to 1,000 milligrams per day. Sometimes even higher. But higher is not always better. And some people feel great on low doses. Some people feel overstimulated or get headaches on high doses. So, dosing depends on your response. Now, in the peptide and research chemical world, people often use NAD plus in injectable form, and dosing can be different than clinic protocols. But again, it should be approached carefully. Now, let's talk about side effects. Because NAD is not always smooth. Potential side effects of NAD therapy can include flushing, nausea, headache, stomach discomfort, chest tightness or pressure, anxiety or restlessness, fatigue afterward, injection site pain, muscle soreness, brain stimulation or insomnia. Some people also report feeling emotional during NAD IV therapy, almost like a detox reaction. Now, is that real? It might be. Because NAD is heavily involved in cellular repair and neurotransmitter metabolism. But we do not have strong clinical research proving that NAD causes emotional detox. It is mostly anecdotal, but it is commonly reported. So if you are considering NAD, know that it is not always a gentle experience. Now, let's talk about who should be cautious. If you have severe cardiovascular issues, you should be cautious. If you have uncontrolled blood pressure issues, you should be cautious. If you have active cancer, you should talk to a doctor before NAD boosting because NAD supports cellular energy and cancer cells also use energy. Now, that does not mean NAD causes cancer. But in active cancer cases, you need professional guidance. If you have anxiety disorders, you may want to start low and slow because NAD can feel stimulating. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, you should avoid NAD therapy unless under medical supervision. Now, let's talk about one of the most important things: NAD and methylation. This is where people get lost. When you boost NAD, your body eventually breaks down NAD into nicotinamide. That nicotinamide can be metabolized and excreted. One of the pathways uses methyl groups. So if you are boosting NAD heavily, some people believe it can deplete methyl donors. That is why you see people stacking NMN with TMG, or stacking NR with methylated B vitamins. Now, does everyone need that?
No.
But if someone starts NAD and gets headaches, fatigue, irritability, or weird mood shifts, sometimes methylation support can help. Again, not medical advice, just a known concept in the NAD world. Now, let's talk about the biggest myth. The myth is that NAD is only for old people. That is not true. You can have NAD depletion from stress, poor sleep, alcohol, and inflammation at any age. But the reason it is more popular in older adults is because NAD decline is strongly associated with aging. But younger people can benefit too, especially if they have fatigue or heavy physical demands. Now, let's talk about NAD and alcohol, because this is important. Alcohol metabolism uses NAD. When your liver breaks down alcohol, it converts NAD+ into NADH. This shifts your NAD balance. That is one reason heavy drinking is so damaging to the liver and metabolism. It disrupts the NAD ratio. So people who drink frequently may have lower functional NAD availability, and they may benefit from NAD restoration. Now, another point: if you take NAD therapy and continue drinking heavily, you are fighting yourself. So if someone is serious about NAD benefits, reducing alcohol is one of the biggest lifestyle upgrades. Now let's talk about NAD and aging in women. Women often feel NAD declines strongly around perimenopause and menopause, because mitochondrial function, hormones, sleep, and inflammation all shift during that phase. So NAD can be very popular for women in their 40s and 50s. Many women report improved energy, improved mood, improved resilience, and improved workout recovery. Now, NAD is not hormone replacement, but it can be a strong support tool. Now, let's talk about NAD and the nervous system. This is something people do not talk about enough. Your nervous system is extremely dependent on energy. Your neurons need ADP constantly, and your nervous system also controls your stress response. So if your NAD is low, you may feel more stressed, more anxious, and more depleted. Some people report NAD makes them feel calmer and more stable. Other people report NAD makes them feel wired. That comes down to dose, delivery method, and individual brain chemistry. Now let's talk about NAD and the mitochondria again, but in a way that clicks. Imagine your mitochondria are like little engines. When you are young, those engines are clean, efficient, and powerful. As you age, those engines get dirty. They get damaged. They lose efficiency. They leak energy. They create more oxidative stress. So even if you are eating the same food, you are producing less usable energy. NAD is like the oil and spark plugs. It helps the engine run smoother. It helps the engine produce more output. It helps the engine repair itself. So when people restore NAD, they often feel like their engine is running better. Now let's talk about how long it takes to feel NAD, because this is another common question. Some people feel NAD effects within hours, especially with IV therapy. Some people feel it within days. Some people feel it after 2 weeks. Some people feel nothing. Now, why would someone feel nothing? Because their NAD may not be the main issue, or because they are not absorbing the product, or because they are not using a high-quality source, or because they have other deficiencies like iron deficiency, thyroid dysfunction, B12 deficiency, or sleep apnea. So if someone is exhausted, NAD is not always the answer, but it is one of the tools. Now, let's talk about NAD and aging biomarkers. Some people want to know if NAD affects things like inflammation markers,
CRP,
blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C, cholesterol, triglycerides. Now, NAD can influence metabolic and inflammatory pathways. So it is possible that improving NAD status could improve some biomarkers. But you should not assume it will fix labs. It is part of a bigger strategy. Now, let's talk about NAD and exercise adaptation. Exercise itself increases NAD and increases mitochondrial biogenesis. Mitochondrial biogenesis means your body creates new mitochondria. That is a huge part of improving fitness and longevity. Some people believe NAD support can enhance mitochondrial biogenesis, especially when combined with exercise. So NAD is not just something you take while laying on the couch. It may work best when you combine it with lifestyle improvements. Now, let's talk about the difference between NAD plus therapy and NAD precursors. This is important. NAD therapy, like IV or injections, delivers NAD more directly. Precursors like NMN and NR provide the building blocks. Precursors tend to be more gradual, less intense, more affordable, more sustainable long-term. NAD IV is more like a dramatic intervention. People often do NAD IV for reset, or after illness, or after burnout, or for addiction recovery,
Or for deep fatigue.
or as a monthly or quarterly treatment. But precursors are more like daily support. So if you are choosing between them, ask yourself, do I want a gradual steady support? Or do I want a powerful aggressive therapy? Now let's talk about NAD and inflammation again. Because inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of aging. Inflammation accelerates collagen breakdown. It accelerates vascular damage. It accelerates brain aging. It accelerates insulin resistance. So if NAD can support inflammation control, that is a major benefit. But again, it is indirect. It is not like taking ibuprofen. It is more like improving your cellular resilience. Now, another question people ask is, does NAD increase lifespan? In animal studies, boosting NAD pathways has shown promising results. In humans, we do not have definitive proof that NAD supplementation increases lifespan. But we do have evidence that NAD declines with age, and raising NAD can improve certain metabolic markers and cellular functions. So the honest answer is, we do not know if NAD will make humans live longer. But we do know that NAD is associated with healthier cellular function. And that is why it is so interesting. Now, let's talk about safety. Because whenever something is hyped, people assume it is either a miracle or a scam. NAD is neither. NAD is a real molecule that your body uses. Boosting NAD is generally considered safe in reasonable doses. But there are still unknowns about long-term, high-dose use, especially with injectable forms. So the safest approach is usually start low, go slow, track how you feel, watch your sleep, watch your mood, watch your blood pressure, watch your energy, and do not combine 10 new things at once. Because if you start NAD plus a GLP-1 plus growth hormone peptides plus stimulants plus new supplements, and then you feel weird, you will not know what caused it. Now let's talk about NAD and longevity stacks. If you are into longevity, NAD is often paired with resveratrol, quercetin, berberine, metformin for some people under medical care, rapamycin under medical supervision, CoQ10,
PQQ.
alpha-lipoic acid, magnesium, vitamin D, omega-3, and peptides like MOS-C, epithalon and thymosin alpha. 1. These stacks are designed to target mitochondria, inflammation, glucose control, and cellular repair. Now, I am not telling you to take all that, but I am showing you how NAD fits into the bigger longevity puzzle. Now, let's talk about something else. NAD and muscle aging. Muscle aging is called sarcopenia. As you age, you lose muscle mass. You lose strength. You lose balance. And muscle is not just about looking good. Muscle is metabolic tissue. Muscle helps regulate blood sugar. Muscle supports longevity. Muscle supports bone density. So maintaining muscle is one of the biggest predictors of healthy aging. NAD supports muscle mitochondrial function. So NAD may support muscle endurance and recovery. Again, not magic, but supportive. Now, let's talk about NAD and heart health. Your heart is a muscle that never stops. It uses massive amounts of energy. Mitochondria are extremely important in heart function. NAD is involved in mitochondrial energy production. So NAD is being researched in cardiovascular aging. Now, that does not mean everyone should run out and inject NAD for heart health, but it does highlight how foundational NAD is. Now, let's talk about NAD and the liver. The liver is another organ that is heavily involved in metabolism. It processes toxins. It processes hormones. It processes alcohol. It regulates glucose. The liver uses NAD heavily. So NAD depletion is common in liver stress. Supporting NAD may support liver metabolic resilience. But if someone has liver disease, they should talk to a medical provider. Now let's talk about NAD and the gut. Gut health is tied to inflammation and immune balance. NAD is involved in immune function. So indirectly, NAD may support gut healing. But NAD is not a gut healing peptide. If someone has gut issues, they may need targeted strategies like diet changes, probiotics, anti-inflammatory support, and sometimes peptides like BPC 157. NAD would be more of a supportive add-on. Now, let's talk about NAD and mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondrial dysfunction is not just fatigue. It can show up as brain fog, exercise intolerance, depression, anxiety, poor recovery, hormonal imbalance, weight gain, poor sleep, cold intolerance, and just feeling like your body is not working right. NAD is one of the major tools for mitochondrial support. But it is not the only tool. You also have CoQ10,
Carnitine,
magnesium, B vitamins, creatine, and peptides like MoC. So NAD is part of a bigger mitochondrial strategy. Now let's talk about the NAD plus injection world specifically, because many people are curious about that. NAD plus is commonly reconstituted and injected. People often do it subcutaneously. Some do it intramuscularly. The biggest complaint is that NAD injections can burn, and they can cause redness or swelling. So many people dilute it more to reduce discomfort, and many people inject slowly. Now, if you are doing NAD injections, you should always make sure you understand sterile technique and proper handling, because anything injectable comes with risk if done improperly. Now, let's talk about another important concept: NAD and cellular senescence. Senescent cells are old damaged cells that stop dividing, but they do not die. They hang around and release inflammatory signals. They're often called zombie cells. They contribute to aging. NAD is involved in pathways that influence senescence and cellular survival. So NAD may influence how your body handles senescent cells. But again, NAD is not a senolytic. Senolytics are compounds designed to help clear senescent cells. NAD is more about energy and repair. Now let's talk about why NAD is sometimes called a longevity molecule. Because NAD supports sirtuins. Sirtuins are linked to longevity pathways. Sirtuins help regulate gene expression. They help regulate stress response. They help regulate metabolism. And NAD is required for sirtuins to function. So when NAD is low, sirtuin activity may be reduced. When NAD is higher, sirtuin activity may increase. And that is one of the reasons NAD is linked to longevity. Now let's talk about what NAD does not do, because this matters. NAD does not replace sleep. NAD does not replace good nutrition. NAD does not replace movement. NAD does not replace hydration. NAD does not replace hormone replacement therapy if you truly need it. NAD does not replace therapy for depression. NAD does not replace treating thyroid problems. NAD does not replace fixing iron deficiency. So NAD is not a cure-all. It is a powerful tool, but it is not the entire toolbox. Now let's talk about who might benefit most from NAD support. In my opinion, people who often report the best results are people over 40, people with chronic fatigue, people with brain fog, people with high stress, people who are burned out, people who are recovering from illness, people who drink alcohol frequently and are trying to repair their system, people who are trying to optimize metabolic health, people who are stacking peptides for body composition and recovery. and people who want a longevity-focused routine. Now, people who might not notice much are young people who already have great energy, people who are already exercising, sleeping well, eating well, and have minimal inflammation, people who are taking low-quality supplements, or people whose fatigue is caused by something else. Now, let's talk about what to look for in NAD-related products. If you are buying NR or NMN, quality matters. Purity matters. Storage matters. Some products degrade. Some products are not stable. Some products are underdosed. So, you want a reputable source. If you are using injectable NAD, quality matters even more, because contamination risk is serious. So, you want trusted sourcing and proper storage. Now, let's talk about NAD and cost. NAD can be expensive. NAD IV clinics can charge hundreds to thousands of dollars. Oral NMN and NR can also be expensive, especially if you take higher doses. So you have to decide if it is worth it. A lot of people will do oral NAD precursors daily, and then do a NAD IV occasionally as a boost. Some people do injections instead of IV, because it is more accessible. Some people skip NAD completely and focus on lifestyle. There is no single right answer. Now, let's talk about a common question. Is NAD better than NADH? NADH supplements are sometimes marketed for energy. But NADH is not the same as NAD+. NADH is more directly tied to immediate energy production. NAD+ is more tied to sirtuin activation and repair. So they're different tools. Most longevity-focused strategies emphasize NAD+ boosting. Now, another question. Can you take too much NAD support?
Possibly.
Some people report headaches, insomnia, irritability, or overstimulation on high doses of NMN or NR. Some people report digestive issues. Some people report anxiety. So yes, you can overdo it. And you can waste money. More is not always better. Now let's talk about NAD and the future, because this is a fast-moving area. Scientists are actively researching NAD boosting strategies. They are researching new delivery systems. They are researching NAD-related enzymes. They are researching CD38 inhibitors. CD38 is an enzyme that breaks down NAD. CD38 activity increases with age. So one strategy is not just to add more NAD. It is to slow down the breakdown. That is a major focus in longevity research. So the NAD world is evolving. We are going to see more advanced products, more clinical research, and probably more targeted therapies in the next few years. Now, let's bring this all together. If you had to summarize NAD+ in one sentence, it would be this. NAD+ is a molecule your body uses to produce energy and repair cells, and it declines with age, which is why boosting it has become a major strategy in longevity and wellness. If you are feeling tired, foggy, inflamed, burned out, or like your recovery is slower than it used to be, NAD is one of the most logical foundational molecules to look at. And if you are building a peptide protocol or a longevity stack, NAD can be a powerful supporting piece. But it is not a miracle. It is not magic. It is not a replacement for the basics. It is a cellular tool. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give you a simple mental checklist. If you are considering NAD support, ask yourself, am I sleeping enough? Am I drinking too much alcohol? Am I eating a nutrient-dense diet? Am I exercising consistently? Am I chronically stressed? Am I deficient in basic vitamins or minerals? Am I doing too much and recovering too little? Because if you fix those things, NAD will work even better. And if you do not fix those things, NAD might still help, but you may not get the full benefits. Now, one more point. If you are the type of person who loves data, you can track your response to NAD by watching your resting heart rate, your sleep quality, your energy levels, your workout performance, your recovery time, your mental clarity, your mood stability, and even lab markers if you want to do it seriously. Because the goal is not just to feel something. The goal is to improve your health and resilience long term. Now, I want to leave you with this. NAD+ is one of the most exciting areas in longevity science because it connects the dots. energy, aging, metabolism, inflammation, brain function, immune function, and cellular repair. It is one of those rare molecules that is truly foundational. And the more you learn about it, the more you realize why it is so hyped.
But also why it deserves respect.
Because it is powerful, and it is not something to treat like candy. So if you decide to explore NAD, start smart, start slow, track your results, and always prioritize quality. Disclaimer. Once again, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I am not providing medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before using NAD+, NAD injections, NAD IV therapy, peptides, supplements, or any compound discussed in this episode. Individual needs vary, and what works for one person may not be safe or appropriate for another. And that wraps up today's episode on NAD+. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more episodes where I make complicated peptides and longevity compounds simple, make sure you follow, share, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.